I think we're live. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. It is McKenna, the owner of Murder by the Book, here again from home with another virtual event. Tonight, I am so glad to be joined by James R. Benn and Stephen Mack Jones. We're here to celebrate the new book in the Billy Boyle series, The Red Horse. And he and Stephen are going to be chatting for a little bit. If you're new to this, we'll be dropping a link in the bio for more information or to order. And I will be back in a little bit after their chat to go through questions from the comments. So if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in there and we'll get to them later. But for now, let me go ahead and get these authors introduced and they can get to chatting. James R. Benn is the author of the Billy Boyle World War II Mysteries. The debut, Billy Boyle, was a Dillis Award nominee, and a Book Sense Top 5 Mystery. A Blind Goddess was longlisted for the Impact Dublin Literary Award. The Rest of Silence was a Barry Award nominee, and The Devouring was a McCavity Award nominee. Benn, a former librarian, splits his time between the Gulf Coast of Florida and Connecticut with his wife, Deborah Mandel. How are you tonight?
Hey, just fine.
And you're in Connecticut, joining us from there tonight, right?
Yep.
All right, wonderful. Stephen Mack Jones is a published poet, an award-winning playwright, and a recipient of the prestigious Hammett Prize, Nero Award, and the Kresge Arts and the Detroit Literary Fellowship. Sorry if I butchered that. He was born in Lansing, Michigan, and currently lives in the suburbs of Detroit. He works in advertising and marketing communications for a number of years before turning to fiction. He currently has 2 books out in his August Snow series. Dead of Winter is coming in May of next year, and we are so happy to be joined by him. So, hi.
Hi, it's wonderful to be here, and especially speaking with you and the wonderful James Benn.
Who is always fascinating. Yay! All right, so I'm going to duck away, mute myself, make my video go away, and I will be back in a little bit. You guys have a great talk.
Okay, thanks,
you.
McKenna.
Bye.
James, it's wonderful to see you, sir. You're
Same here.
looking good. I'm just amazed with the Red Horse. Now, this is my advanced reader copy, but just so that everybody knows, it's out. Your book birthday was when?
September 1st.
September 1st.
Right.
So it's out in hardback. It's wonderful for folks that have been following the Billy Boyle World War II mysteries. I think it's fair to say that, well, war is hell, and you've put your characters through it.
Yeah.
Would that be a fair statement?
A fair and necessary statement.
Yes.
One of the things that I really believe in crime fiction is we write about violence, and I think we owe it to our readers and to society to deal with that violence in a way that is realistic in terms of the consequence on the individual for what they experience and the violence that they inflict on others. It has a price. And there's a lot of thrillers where the protagonist just goes through the book and inflicts violence and sustains violence. And this, at the end of the book, they're the same person. And
right.
That's
right.
That's okay. That's escapist reading. That's fine. But if
it's
I'm writing,
almost like following an automaton. Somebody.
Yeah.
Right.
And in writing about a real event, World War II, I don't believe it's appropriate to do that. So that's why we end up where we find these 2 guys in this book.
Well, the job that you do with bringing the dimensions of World War II out, and not only bringing those dimensions of a terrible war out, but you have for each one of your books, you've explored an even darker corner of the war. You bring out, you put a spotlight on what would otherwise be maybe a historical footnote or something that could be looked over.
Mm-hmm.
And that I find is intriguing, that you have respect for the history of that war itself, but you've also probed into corners that few people may know about.
And certainly, yeah, I thought I knew a lot about World War II, and it turns out I really didn't. And sometimes you use the term footnote. It was literally a footnote in a book that would lead me to the next book. The Devouring, that was set in Switzerland and dealt with how Jewish refugees were treated in Switzerland. I came to literally in a footnote at the end of a book about something else. So every now and then something will just pop out at me, and I'll say that I need to know more about that. That's a book right there. And in this case, I was reading an article about psychological warfare in World War II, and there was something that popped out at me, and it just, I had never heard of it. Most people hadn't heard of it. And I said, that has to be in a book. And that's the secret at the heart of the Red Horse. And ironically, it's so secret that I really can't talk about it because it's a spoiler to talk about it in this book. But I was astounded, and I've grown pretty cynical about what I've learned about how things were done in the war. But this secret, the secret of the Red Horse, was just absolutely gobsmacked me that our side did this. And that's what really drives this book forward, is the question of what's appropriate to do to defeat an evil enemy. How evil can you become to do that? And
Yes.
then you find your way back.
Yes. Now, and I won't give any spoilers, but would you agree that it's really the events toward and including the end of the previous book, When Hell Struck 12, that lead us to the Red Horse? Is that a fair statement?
Yes, yes. For those of you who might not have read the When Hell Struck 12, at the end of that, both Billy Boyle, Captain Billy Boyle, who's the protagonist of the series, and his best friend, Kaz, are in a lot of trouble physically and emotionally during the liberation of Paris. And they are brought to a secret military hospital in England. And it's a place modeled on a real special operations executive facility that was actually in Scotland. It wasn't a hospital in real life. It was a lodge where agents who knew too much were kept on ice so they wouldn't, upon being released, say too much. And I was intrigued by that. And I thought, well, maybe it could be a hospital. And that's where these guys are going, because they know a lot of secrets. Kaz has a heart condition. Billy is suffering from the effects of overuse of methamphetamines in the days leading up to the liberation of Paris. And they're both brought to this secure facility so that they can be healed, but also so they can't get out and reveal what they know. And that's where Billy stumbles upon more secrets.
And one of the things that fascinated me about the Red Horse is the fact that even though you've taken Billy and Kaz to the extreme of physical mental stress. When it comes right down to it, their ability to perform their trained duties is like muscle memory.
Mhm.
And I find that extraordinary in Billy and Kaz and the characters that you build, that you inhabit, that regardless of the many trials and trauma and horror of World War II, these are people who have in their DNA the ability to go above and beyond. And I this may sound trivial, Jim, but I find that heartening and hopeful.
Yeah, you know, you can't divorce modern times, the times in which you're writing, from the period in which you're writing. And there are many times where I reflected on where we are today and what people in the 1940s did and endured, and why they did it. And for Kaz, it's in his DNA in that he's Polish and his country is under horrible occupation by the Nazis. He has nowhere to go but to fight. That's the only thing left for him. And Billy, it's a little different. You know, he's got the ability to fall back on what's waiting for him in the States, but he's driven by always wanting to know the truth, and that's what
Yes.
in a lot of trouble, because the pursuit of truth in wartime is dangerous.
Yeah, well, what's the old saying? The fog of war.
Right.
Can you just talk for a moment about Kaz? I find Billy is very intriguing and stands tall. I'm intrigued with Kaz. Can you address where he's from, what he's gone through,
Well, you
and
know,
how that reflects the reality of that particular war?
so Kaz is a Polish baron. Not many people know there was an aristocracy in Poland that was wiped out by the Nazis. And his comes from a wealthy family. And he was marooned in England at the outbreak of the war. He was a student of languages at Oxford. His family was wiped out, or so he thought at the time. And he was left alone, very wealthy, because his father was about to leave Poland and had transferred the family wealth out of the country before he was taken by the Nazis. And Kaz is really, he's so much fun to write because he's this sophisticated, urbane foil to Billy, who's sometimes, you know, kind of a happy-go-lucky Yank and naive often about the ways of the world. And Kaz is just a delight, but I think I've been able to imbue him with a certain life because I never intended for him to live. In the first book, he was supposed to die because I thought Billy needed a motivator, because it's all about the personal with him. And I thought if the first friend he makes is killed, that'll be his motivator. And then I realized, writing in the first person, I needed a second set of eyes. I needed a sidekick, because the protagonist sees everything and you're with the protagonist in the first person for the whole book. Sometimes you need somebody to go off stage and do something and come back. So I had to look around for somebody else to kill, and Kaz lived. But he's close to, he's in bad shape at the beginning of this book.
Yeah. And I don't, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think the Polish contribution to the Allies has been spoken of, addressed, and honored enough.
And it was, I mean, they were the first nation to fight, first nation to be attacked by both sides, the Russians and the Germans, betrayed by the Americans and the British. And shamefully, at the end of the war, you know, a lot of Poles fought in the RAF, they fought on the ground in Italy and France. And at the end of the war, they were shut out of the victory parade in London because Stalin didn't want them to be front center. And then there was a backlash, again, you know, reflecting our times. There was a backlash against immigrants in Great Britain. And surveys at the time showed that most of the people in Great Britain wanted the Poles to be thrown out. There were too many of them, even though they had fought and died and bled in the fight to keep England free. So Poles took it on the chin every which way, and Kaz sort of stands in for that kind of.
Yes, and wonderfully so. Now, let's do a little math here, which everybody's favorite subject. At the end of between the end of When Hell Struck 12, and I love holding your books up, and The Red Horse. Now there is linear publishing time, and then there is World War II Billy Boyle time. And by my calculations, I'm guessing that at the chaotic end of, maybe chaotic isn't the word for it, but at the end of When Hell Struck 12 and The Red Horse, I'm guessing there's like 3 weeks between the end of When Hell Struck 12 and The Red Horse. So you're keeping the time frame very tight, and the situations that these gentlemen endure for the Allied High Command, very intense, which is something else that I found fascinating with The Red Horse. It's like, my God, what can follow When Hell Struck 12? And you took me by surprise by placing that situation here. You took me by surprise, but also it was one of those situations of internally I'm going, oh my God, that makes a lot of hard sense. So can you talk about the time frame between the books?
Well, there's two parts to that, and one is in writing a series that's a set during a specific timeline. I find that I want to make each book different, but yet the same. I want the same characters. I want the same sort of challenges, but the situation has to be different. And I think that the settings need to be modulated, in that the last two books were both in northern France, both involved a lot of combat, as well as a mystery. And I thought this time I've got to pull back. So a hospital that's kind of a locked room setting vibe to it, that's the place to go, because we're going to have the same characters, some of the same issues, but we need to enclose them a little bit this time, and not do the same, Billy in trouble on the field of combat story. So that's the trick in writing a one book a year series, is to keep it alive with fresh settings and the same characters.
Yes, but
And then,
I'm sorry.
The timeline, I'm in a bit of a rush to do a few things because I do want to keep to an historical timeline, and certain things happened at a certain time. So at the end of this book, Billy gets a few days off, and then he finds himself next year in the Road of Bones, going to the Soviet Union. So that's a change in setting, for sure. And that's going to be a challenge for Kaz, because the Free Poles and the Russians don't mix very well. So, but yeah, that I think is one of the challenges, is to keep the setting fresh, but also to find a way to fit the story into the timeline without going too far afield. I don't like to write about something that happened really a year previously and say it happened in 1944. It just doesn't feel right to me.
Well, I think another interesting aspect between the end of When Hell Struck 12 and The Red Horse is how do I say this? Though the combat aspect is backgrounded in The Red Horse, the tension is still there, and the tension and the results of that combat is still fresh.
That's just what we were talking about before. It's the effects of violence. So even though we're off the battlefield is still with them.
Yes.
One of the things that Billy encounters in this secret hospital is electroshock therapy. And I was doing some research on it because I thought maybe it was used during that time. And electroshock therapy was, well, I don't want to say discovered, but popularized by an Italian psychiatrist in the 1930s, after he observed the effect of pigs being shocked before they were slaughtered. When they were given a shock like to the head, just like an electric shock therapy, they became docile. So it was easier to lead them to the slaughter. In World War II, we used electroshock therapy on guys that were out of it and didn't want to go back onto the line. They were given electroshock therapy, given a few days off, and sent back to the slaughter in a more docile fashion. And there were some doctors that hated doing it. It was actually done very close to the front lines. In this case, it happens in England. But there were a lot of treatments to patch guys up. There was a pill they called the Blue 88 that's in this book. And it knocked you out for up 48 hours and sort of reset you, they hoped, so that you could then go back into combat. So there were all these devices to get some more life, if that's the right word, out of soldiers and send them back to the front. So that sort of thing meant that the threat of going back, the threat of more violence was always in the air in a place like this.
Now, and again, I don't want to give too much away, but we are also, you are also addressing essentially the dawn of heart surgery. Am I revealing too much?
I don't think so. I think we'll just talk about it generally, but
yes.
I did some research into where, because Kaz has a heart problem, And when I wrote the first book and said that, I had no idea what that meant. It was just a little device. And this past few books, I thought, well, I had to really figure out what's wrong with this heart. And I found out that there was a real prohibition in the medical community up until the 1940s at the thought of even touching the human heart. There was one British doctor who performed heart surgery in the 20s. It was successful. The patient then died from something else, and he lost his privileges at the hospital because there was just a belief: you don't touch the human heart. It's too delicate. Can't take it. And it was only with the advent of the war, even with a lot of resistance, finally, one doctor, an American, Dwight Harkin, was able to get permission to operate on the heart to take out shrapnel from guys who were coming back from D-Day. And he saved hundreds of men that way. And he was actually, he first went to the Mediterranean theater and was cashiered because he dared to operate on the heart. He was thrown out by the chief medical officer of the Mediterranean Theater of Operations. Finally, a hospital in England took him. And at that point, he was, except for the one guy who did it once, he was the first doctor to operate on the human heart. And he was plucking pieces of shrapnel as it pumped through the heart, plucking it out so it wouldn't do any harm then or in a year after that. He saved hundreds of people. He was very advanced in terms of ambulatory recovery. So he had patients get up right after their heart surgery, walk up and down the hall. That was crazy talk back then. But he trained the first heart surgeons. He was one of a kind.
Well, this is, I think we're at a point where I just have to say, for everybody that's listening or watching in, the book is The Red Horse. The author is James R. Benn, and I count myself as fortunate not only for having read his books, but also knowing of him as an extraordinarily good person, a good man. So
thank you, Stephen. I got a problem with you. I got a bone to pick with you.
Oh God, you and my woman.
Where's August Snow 3? Come on.
August Snow 3.
Yeah.
It's been pushed back to May 4th of 2021. Mm-hmm. May the 4th be with you.
And you.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, it's the pandemic has kind of played havoc with the release schedule. But just to let people know, August is on his way, and he'll be arriving in a Oldsmobile 442.
Wow, cool.
Big block.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, a big block front or rear wheel drive muscle car is something you don't drive in the winter.
In Detroit.
In Detroit.
Yeah.
I mean, you can do donuts all day.
Right. Yeah. Okay, well, I will patiently sort of wait. Well, August Snow he's a fantastic character.
Thank you, sir. And it should be noted that we share the same tremendous publisher, Soho Press,
right?
Where Bronwyn Ruska just won Publisher of the Year from
right. Yes.
Strand Magazine. So I think we can both count our blessings there.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So what's next? You mentioned Bones in the Road.
The Road of Bones. So as you know, it wasn't called the Gulag during the Second World War, but there was a whole network of prison camps, slave labor in the Soviet Union. And literally hundreds of thousands of political prisoners were put to work in Siberia building a road from the Far Eastern Sea up north. They had very little in the way of tools. The tundra was permanently frozen, and a lot of them died. And the only place that they could bury them was in the roadbed that they were digging out. So there's today, this road still exists. And if you drive on it, you're driving on the road of bones. The dead were just laid out in the roadbed and gravel put over them. So we meet a political prisoner who's been released from the road of bones to cooperate with Billy on a joint investigation of a murder, a delicate international situation that took place in the Soviet Union. And both sides don't trust each other. So Billy represents the Americans and this other fellow represents the Russians. And it's very, again, in the light of current events, it's interesting to write about how the Soviet Union operated and what they expected of their people and how they treated them. Yes. So I just finishing that up to send it into Soho for next year.
You know, I'm a little jealous of your process. Speaking with me, is this the first time you've been out in about 8 months? Or,
actually,
you know, technology has changed.
It just about is. I mean, you're my big date night right now. I have to say there were times during the initial lockdown that it was very hard to focus. And then after a while, it was like, okay, this is just what I do. And I have fewer distractions.
Yes.
So like having fun, you know.
Yes.
So I did find it a fairly fertile time. I've also just finished a young adult manuscript set in Denmark during World War II that deals with the escape of the Jews from.
Fantastic.
So it was pretty interesting. One of the things, just quickly, that I learned doing that is, you know, people always talk about the rescue of the Jews. But what happened in Denmark is 7,000 Jews got word that they would be rounded up tomorrow morning, and they disappeared themselves overnight. And they had help from a lot of their friends, their Gentile friends. But we always hear the rescue of the Jews as if they had no agency themselves.
Yes, yes.
7,000 people disappeared and made it to Sweden. And that wasn't, they just weren't passive. They were involved in every step of the way. So that was just a new way to look at that story. So,
my goodness. We'll look forward to that, Jim. Really look forward to that. Now, someone out there is probably wondering, what is your process? I mean, you are 15 books in. You're still a young man, 34, 35. What is your process?
Well, you know, part of it is in writing the series, I know these characters. When they come on the stage, they kind of know what to do, but I have to give them a situation to react to. And that's the trick. It's finding that footnote. It's finding that theme that you want to explore. And then we figure out a crime to investigate, but that's only a means to delve into this greater theme. So I've got the characters, they exist up here, they know what to do, but I have to send them somewhere. I have to give them a job to do. And it's finding what the overarching theme is going to be that is the most important part of that.
Yes.
Because, you know, it's a murder mystery. I mean, somebody dies, you know, it's pretty straightforward. But what are we exploring? What are the stakes? Who did it? And actually, one of the things that interests me the least is a whodunit. I want to know why done it. Why'd they do it?
Yes.
What brought them to that point where they had to take that step?
And what is the cost of that?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. And what's the backstory? how did, were they born a murderer? No, very few people were.
Right.
But what made them get to that point in time? So it's still bringing all those elements together and then spending a long time banging at the keyboard.
Yeah.
It's not pretty.
No, I was asked recently, and I know that this is a question that's going around in the so-called writing community. Are you going to write address the pandemic in any of your work? And I have to say, I have absolute zero interest in addressing this current situation, because if I did, it would be less bizarre.
Mm-hmm. You would be normalizing it in a way.
I would be normalizing it, and it would be linear. Mm-hmm. And a lot
Aren't you just sort of sick of it too? I mean, is that where you want to go in your writing?
Yeah.
Not me.
I mean, the truth of the matter is, folks have been saying, well, self-isolate. Mm-hmm. I've been self-isolating since 1984. So,
no problem.
Hey, yeah, right. I just noticed that we have more toilet paper in the house.
And curbside pickup for food. I mean,
right, exactly. Yeah. But no, it's the world that we live in now is just so bizarre that, as you said, if I tried to make something linear of it, it would make it appear normal.
Oh. And how could you catch up with the reality? Yes. You started writing it today, it comes out a year and a half, 2 years from now. What sense would that make?
Right, right. So
we don't want to read about this stuff. Is that what we're saying here?
Yeah.
I don't.
I honestly don't want to read about it. Mm-hmm. As I'm sure you've seen from the newspaper, well, if anybody reads newspapers anymore, but the news itself is bizarre enough, and disturbing enough. If I want bizarre and disturbing, I'll make something up. Yeah. But again, we're a little off track. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, this is the great James R. Benn, and his new book is The Red Horse, Billy Boyle, World War II Mystery, and Jim just keeps knocking it out of the park.
Thank you, Stephen.
Absolutely. Thank you for this series. It's easy for us to get pigeonholed into genre, the mystery genre, the crime genre, et cetera, and so forth. But there is a high literary quality to your writing that at its heart, it's a mystery. Mm-hmm. But the quality of writing is it's just extraordinary. I can't put it in any other way.
Thank you.
So, and while these books may be in the genre of mystery, trust me, folks, they transcend and illuminate beyond any talk of genre. But you'll find them in the mystery section anyway. And our guests are, we are the guests of Murder by the Book.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah.
Like to thank Murder by the Book for this opportunity to talk to a wonderful author and my friend James R. Benn. And I guess this is the point where we should both just kind of say, hey, get out there and get books from your independent bookstore.
Absolutely.
Support these folks. This is a tough time. And that's probably the understatement of the century, even though the century is young. But yeah, support Murder by the Book, and wherever you're listening in from, viewing from, there's an independent bookstore near you that's ready to get you the Red Horse. Okay.
Well said. Well said.
All
So
right.
do we have any questions, McKenna?
You know what? We don't have any questions. I've offered it several times. We have people watching, but we do have a comment from Laura. Mr. Benn, your books remind me of Foyle's War, where someone's tackling murders during the middle of a war. Some people think it's pointless to do so, but both main characters, Billy Boyle and Christopher Foyle, believe murderers should be still caught. And on that note, I was hoping maybe, well, we're finding that a lot of people are watching virtual events right now for authors they've never read. So I was wondering if both of you actually could tell us a little bit about your series character for people who just are dipping a toe in and not necessarily grabbing the new one. You want to start, Stephen? Why don't you tell us about August Snow?
Oh, well, thank you. August Octavio Snow is a former Marine, ex-Detroit cop, who was fired from the department for investigating malfeasance from the prior mayor. Wow, that could never happen in Detroit. He wins a $12 million wrongful dismissal suit and just wants to lose himself in rebuilding his family home where he was raised in a portion of Detroit called, it's Southwest Detroit. It's more commonly known as Mexican Town. August is half Black and half Hispanic, half Mexican American. And he's a troubleshooter. He finds himself dealing with dirty offshore money, coming back onshore, kidnapping, human trafficking. And the thing about human trafficking is you hear about that problem along the southern border states. What people need to realize is Michigan is a border state. Detroit is a border town. And that's what happens with August Snow and Mexican Town. The first book is named August Snow. The second book is Lives Laid Away. And the third, coming in May, is Dead of Winter. Jimmy, over to you.
Okay, I'll just say one thing though. There's great food in the August Snow books. You're going to want to drive to Detroit and go eat at some of these places when you read these books. So Billy Boyle is at the beginning of the series, a very young Boston police detective. He comes from a family of Irish American police detectives. And he owes his position 90% to Grafton corruption, and the other 10% to his family connections. It's the family business. And what happens when war is declared in December of 1941, his father and his uncle decide that they don't want Billy to be killed in another war for the English, which is how they, as good Irish Republicans, look at it. Their brother was killed in the First World War, and they don't want Billy to go in the same direction. So they come up with a scheme to have him appointed to the staff of a little-known colonel. That's a family relation through Billy's mother, Dwight Eisenhower. So they think they've got him safe and sent to Washington, D.C., where he can just sit out the war. But of course, Eisenhower gets appointed to head up the U.S. Army in Europe. He takes Billy with him, thinking he's got a trained detective who's part of the family. And it just occurred to me that this is where Billy and August Snow share a similarity. So August Snow has this $12 million settlement, which basically allows him to do whatever he wants, right? Billy has General Eisenhower as his boss, which means Billy can do whatever I want him to do because Eisenhower can tell him to go anywhere and do anything. So I think both our characters share that sort of higher power that lets them move throughout the world in a way that they wouldn't normally if it was just an ex-cop or just a military detective.
Right.
There's extra oomph that lets them move through the world. And that, that makes for an interesting story.
And just when you think you can rest on the laurels of money and connection, there are twists and turns and demands put on you that would otherwise not be there. So that's who I am. That's part of who Jimmy is.
Minus the $12 million.
It's coming.
Yeah.
No problem.
So a little bit about process, because I find that people are always interested in this, kind of knowing how the magic happens. What does an average writing day look like for you guys? And since he's getting a beverage, why don't we start with you, Jimmy, this time?
Okay. So my average writing day starts at my wife dragging me off for a walk, so we stay healthy, and I grudgingly go ahead and we have a good time. Then it's time for lunch. Then it's got to fit a nap in there somewhere. And so around 2 o'clock, I start panicking. I've got to get writing. And usually that's my most productive. I may do a little bit of work in the morning, but I'm a real slow starter. But by the time the afternoon and early evening rolls around, things are usually flowing if they're going to flow. So I'm a late day writer, not one of these 6 a.m. writers who are absolutely insane as far as I'm concerned.
As far as I'm concerned too, I'm not a morning person at all. So I can get stuff done evening, late hours, very, very well. And do you have a word count goal, or do you just write a certain time?
I like to do 1,000 words a day. I like to do more, but if I can do 1,000 words a day, I stay in the story. The story stays in my mind. I'm thinking about it all the time. If I do less than that, then I'm moving the pages along, but it's not quite the same thing. So 1,000 word minimum is a great goal. It doesn't always happen. And sometimes it's 2,000.
Hey,
and how
Jim,
about you?
Well, I just wanted to ask Jim if he's found a way to make naps tax deductible. Because, pardon me, naps are very important. I consider that part of the work process.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You got to let your subconscious do the work.
Exactly. The fingers aren't moving across the keyboard, but yeah, there's work being done. For me, I try to get as Jim said, 1,000, 1,200 words a day, hopefully 4 or 5 days a week. I keep thinking of Elmore Leonard's work ethic, which I am nowhere near, but so the story goes, Elmore Leonard would get up at 6 o'clock. He would have toast and coffee. He would make a sandwich and wrap it in wax paper. Then he would take that sandwich and a thermos of coffee to his study. And he would write longhand on yellow legal pads until 11:30, 12 o'clock. He would unwrap his sandwich, unscrew his thermos of coffee, have his lunch for 40, 45 minutes, and then continue on until 4:30, 5 o'clock. That was his job that he was going to. I wish I had that kind of discipline. But still, the job gets done because I can't think of anything else I'd rather do. And Jim, yeah.
You know, I'm in a little bit of a hiatus now. I just finished the book I'm about to turn in. I haven't started the next one. It's been about 4 or 5 days. I'm just starting to get a little antsy.
So we do have a question that popped up. Laura asked for you, Jim, how many story ideas do you already have planned out for future books? And she also wanted to state that she has learned many things about World War II that she didn't know before, which I will also say in reading your books. I feel like anytime you read historical fiction or historical mysteries, there's this great thing about them where you actually are learning, but it doesn't feel like you're learning. It just feels like pleasure reading. And I learned a whole lot in your series, just like Laura. So thank you for that. And back to her question, how many stories do you have planned out?
Well, the story, so we've got the book that's done for next year, set in Russia. Then we're going to southern France, where we're going to meet up with the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, which was the most decorated unit in the American Army. They were all Japanese Americans, well, except for most of their officers. They were Japanese Americans whose families were all in the detention camps in the West. And, you know, I had known I wanted to write about them, and I didn't quite have an idea about what it was going to be about. And then I read in a history of that unit that their commanding officer, who's of course a white officer, who really hated them and who chewed them up and wasted lives. And I thought that's the story. So we'll be with them in southern France. I was looking into Audrey Hepburn, who was a young Dutch girl, 15, 16 years old during the occupation, was involved to a certain extent with the Dutch resistance. And I just haven't found a way into that story. I could see Billy going there and having a reason to meet with her, but I just don't know if that's going to develop into something that has a story behind it. Then there's so much at the end of the war. I mean, we've got trains full of gold. We've got gold being hidden in lakes. There's all sorts of crazy stuff went on right in the days right at the end of the war. And I'm sure there'll plenty of, there's no shortage of ideas. They're just lying around on the ground. All you have to do is pick them up and see which ones really speak to you. So there's a lot of building.
One thing that I wanted to talk about, and just briefly, was who was it? Pope Pius during World War II. You added a lot of nuance to that story, and a story of a pope who is generally billed as a bad guy, a bad person. But there was so much nuance that you brought to it, and I mean, that's one of the joys of reading you, Jim, is the nuance that you bring. I mean, it's not good versus evil. It's good versus evil, but what are the shades of good and what are the shades of evil?
And it's also important to realize where our understanding comes from. Why do we all think Pope Pius was a bad person? A lot of it comes from a play called The Deputy that was written by a German in the 1960s. And it was an expose of what Pius did during the war. Turns out, after the fall of the Soviet Union and all the KGB files come out, that playwright was in the pay of the Russians, and they wanted to denigrate Catholicism because Catholicism was a strong voice in Eastern Europe and the countries of the Eastern Bloc. So the play that formed the popular cultural opinion of Pope Pius was, guess what? Russian disinformation. They just didn't have Facebook back then. They had to pay a playwright to write a play.
Well, thank goodness we're over that.
Yeah, whew. Yeah. Don't have to worry about that one.
Yeah, that's out of here.
All right, so I think we've reached the point in the evening when I should go ahead and wrap things up. I do want to say a little note about your publisher, Soho Press. I will say, having been a mystery bookseller for so many years, we have learned that it is always a safe bet to hand sell someone a book from Soho Crime. At any location, any interest, any time period, it's going to be a good read. The quality is always there. So I'm so happy to have both of you here tonight representing Soho. We're going to have an event with Stuart Neville coming up in about a month. He'll be in conversation with John Connelly, and it's it's for a short story collection involving the characters from Ghost of Belfast, which is one of my all-time favorite books. Soho also publishes Cara Black, Peter Lovesey, loads of other fabulous authors that many of you who are regular mystery readers enjoy. So if you haven't tried these two gentlemen, I think that you are in safe territory to give them a shot. I failed to mention earlier that we have signed book plates for, Stephen, would you hold up the book again?
It doesn't.
There it is. I'm so sorry. It was my day off today, and I forgot to plan yesterday to bring the books home for the event. So I appreciate you having it. Yeah, exactly. So we have signed book plates for that. And of course, we always have the books by both authors in stock. So we'd love, if you are enjoying these events, for you to give us a chance to get those books in your hands. I guess that's all for now. We'll be back. We've got several of these every week. So if you're enjoying them, make sure to check out our event schedule. And thank you so much to both of you for your time this evening. It's always a pleasure.
It was great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great evening, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, always good to see you.
Same here, buddy.
Bye.